there's a significant body of pretty knowledgeable opinion, which is otherwise quite well informed, which had convinced itself that Pakistan is geopolitically irrelevant, that it has become marginal because of the magnitude of its domestic crisis, and therefore we can ignore it. I think that assessment was wrong or is wrong.
Pakistan has made global headlines for its attempts to broker a peace deal between Iran and the United States. The big question in India has been how come this neighbor that we hold responsible for sponsoring terrorism in India, including that vicious Pahalgam attack last year, managed to gain such stature and repute on the global stage? Also, a year after Operation Sindoor, where is the relationship between India and Pakistan at? TCA Raghavan, writer and former diplomat, is joining me to answer some of these questions and provide context and analysis on this really complicated subject. He knows this relationship and this region better than most. He was the Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan between 2013 and 15. He was Deputy High Commissioner to Pakistan before that. And at the MEA, he was Joint Secretary responsible for our relationship with Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Iran. Dr. Raghavan, thank you for making time for Keep Talking.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So, between May and June last year, we spent considerable diplomatic effort and resources to get the world to see Pakistan as a state sponsor of terror, especially in India. But clearly, the world does not see Pakistan like that, and the United States definitely doesn't see Pakistan like that. Why is this contradiction in this perception that we have and the world has, and how does it matter?
Well, I think to answer the question, we have to put together two or three things which are not otherwise directly related. And the first is that, yes, it is true that our focus on Pakistan as a major facilitator and sanctuary provider to terrorists who carry out acts of terrorism against India, and Pakistan using these terrorist outfits as an instrument of its own state policy to gain certain political objectives. It is true that this perception is not shared by many other countries. And the reason why this is so is that international geopolitics has shifted over the past 5 or 6 years. And in particular, the global war on terror, which began after 9/11 as a kind of international consensus, as a kind of umbrella to put pressure on terrorists through coordinated diplomacy and international coordination. That umbrella no longer exists. The global war on terror is over. The US has withdrawn from Afghanistan, and the whole, in a sense, the paradigm has changed. And with that paradigm change and that change in international focus, other countries are now viewing Pakistan through through their own assessment. They no longer see Pakistan through the prism of the global war on terror. So while we face a certain terrorist threat and we have our own assessment of Pakistan, that assessment is not shared as widely as we would like it to be. That is one particular change which has taken place. The second is that in our own assessments and in our own approach, because of the internal crisis that Pakistan went through from 2019 onwards, its economic crisis, its political crisis, the civil military strains, the rapid devaluation of its rupee, the internal security challenges it was facing, many of us felt that Pakistan had become a geopolitically irrelevant factor, and that we could ignore it or isolate it, and it did not really carry much weight in international affairs or in regional affairs. And I think that assessment was wrong. The fact is that Pakistan is a country of 250 million people. It's the fifth largest country in the world. It is situated in a sensitive location. It has nuclear weapons. So, with these attributes, it will always have a certain geopolitical salience and a relevance. And the fact that it played its cards very adroitly to provide a platform for mediating in the Iran US conflict, it brought into play, in fact, all those attributes that it had certain something to offer to each of the parties in that conflict. And they were able to leverage that role to present itself as a peacemaker and a mediator, all of which goes against our own assessment of Pakistan. But the fact is, we have to accept reality when it presents itself.
So it is independent of how we see it, the way Pakistan is seen and how it performs on the world stage. But does that mean that our efforts have failed, especially that diplomatic outreach, those multi party delegations we sent out after Operation Sindoor and everything that we did to sort of isolate Pakistan and to show up Pakistan in a certain way? Should we see that as a failure, or are the two not related? Can they be separated out of each other?
Very evidently, Pakistan is not isolated. And if that indeed was our effort, then you can say that yes, that effort was not successful. On the other hand, one can argue that the effort was really to explain our position. And as I said, you can explain your position and you can have a certain position which other countries may recognize, but they will in the end frame their policies based on their own interests. This is what is something which we have to understand about international affairs, that countries will not see developments through your eyes. They will see it through the prism of their own interests and their own assessments.
In this piece you wrote in the Telegraph, you said that Pakistan has pulled off what you call it an astonishing role, pulled off a significant diplomatic feat. Why was Pakistan so uniquely positioned to play this role?
Well, it's a combination of factors. Firstly, they have their relations with the US have been on an upswing, especially since 2024. Now, that upswing may appear much more or appear exaggerated because before that, from 2018 till 2024, there was a severe downswing in US Pakistan relations. I mean, you should remember that President Biden did not even have a telephone call with Prime Minister Imran Khan. With Imran Khan when he was Prime Minister. But since 2024, and especially over 2025, there is an upswing in US Pakistan relations for a number of reasons. Secondly, the Pakistan has very strong relations with many of the countries in the Gulf, and in particular with Saudi Arabia. And thirdly, they are an immediate neighbor of Iran, with a long border, and notwithstanding many frictions in that relationship, Pakistan has a pretty deep relationship with Iran. And one evidence for that is the fact that after the US and Iran broke their diplomatic relations in 1979, the Iranian interest section in the United States, which is a kind of diplomatic term for how countries which don't have diplomatic relations manage their interface. The Iranian interest section in Washington has been housed in the Pakistan embassy. So it does tell you that this is a relationship of some depth. I think the other factor which we have to accept is that Pakistan also was relatively even-handed in the US-Iran conflict. So while it condemned the attacks on Iran and the assassination of its supreme leader, it also condemned quite strongly the Iranian attacks on the Gulf countries. So it was positioned as being relatively even-handed. And finally, the fact that it has no relations with Israel, or almost a zero relationship with Israel, also made it more acceptable to Iran. So I think this combination of factors made Pakistan present itself as being a effective platform to be a to on which a mediatory process could play out. It's a different matter that that process was not successful, or so far at least has not been successful. But I would say, I think for any country to have brought uh, Iran and United States, which have such deep strategic distrust and such a poor relationship, it's quite a significant act of diplomacy.
In India, there was a considerable, how shall I say, there was a sense, there was some heartburn. There was considerable heartburn, at least on social media, about the fact that Pakistan was playing this role. We also heard, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar say that India is not a dalal country or not a broker, doesn't need to be a broker. This kind of heartburn and then subsequent rejoicing when the talks failed in India. Is this a social media phenomenon where anybody who can read what's going on can express an opinion? Or is this something that is a reflection of what our government, the Indian government, believes at this point of time? How would you assess what's going on there?
No, I think it's largely a social media phenomena. I think the government of India welcomed the fact that the US and Iran were beginning a process of dialogue, and that they had agreed on a ceasefire, which still appears to be holding, however, tenuously. And it's not rocket science. The fact that the intensity of the conflict came down and there is a possibility of some deal being worked out, even if it has not been worked out yet, is entirely in our interest, because the conflict, that war over there, is something which is totally against our interest, no matter in what way you look at it, economically, socially, in terms of employment, the disruption of supply chains, etc., etc. So the heartburn, if that is the term, was I would think it's a kind of angst that an adversary has ended up playing this role. But I would say that that's not a very mature position, because we were not really in competition to play that role. There's a kind of zero sum mentality among some people in Pakistan, that in India, and also in Pakistan, a zero sum mentality in Pakistan about India certainly exists. And I think it's catching on in India, that even if something is in your interest, because Pakistan seeks to benefit from it, also you oppose it. I think that zero sum mentality is not a good approach.
But you're saying it's a social media phenomenon. It is everybody today who can,
I think
claim to have an
I
opinion.
think largely it was a social media phenomena. As I said, the government certainly welcomed the fact that there was a ceasefire in place. But I think there is also a factor which I mentioned at the outset. There's a significant body of pretty knowledgeable opinion, which is otherwise quite well informed, which had convinced itself that Pakistan is geopolitically irrelevant, that it has become marginal because of the magnitude of its domestic
It's
crisis,
problem.
and therefore we can ignore it. I think that assessment was wrong, or is wrong, because clearly the fact that Pakistan is a important regional player, notwithstanding its huge domestic crisis and all the challenges it faces and all the threats it poses to its neighbors, it remains a significant player, and you have to deal with it as such, and you can't just ignore it or pretend that it doesn't exist or is irrelevant.
You mentioned one of the things that made Pakistan uniquely able to pull this off was the fact that it was even handed. And that is in pretty sharp contrast to the way India first reacted when the war began, starting with Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel just a couple of days before the war, and then subsequently the very delayed reactions of condolence, and or any sort of censuring of the perpetrators of the attack, i.e., Israel and the United States. Was there any scope for India to have played a similar role or any kind of role in any peace negotiation? And does it matter? Should India have wanted to play that role? Because there are certain critics of India's foreign policy who believe that, as a leader of the global south and, as Vishwa Guru, so many different things that India can claim as, the non-aligned movement founder. Is there something that is a missed opportunity here?
No, theoretically one can play that role, but in practical terms, given how the situation has developed over the past few years, we could not have played that because our interests have led to different. Our interests have led us on a different trajectory. We now have a very strong relationship with Israel. Uh, and that is a third factor, which, apart from the relations we have with the United States and the fact that our interests are so overwhelmingly tied to the GCC countries because of other factors, but also because of the large number of Indians who live there. So when you put these three together, your relationship with Iran to a significant extent gets outweighed by these three relationships on one side, which is not to say that you cannot play a mediatory role or a balancing role with relations with all the parties concerned. But I think the way these relationships have developed over the past few years, it was quite evident that our we were moving away from a stronger relationship with Iran, simply because of the weight of the relationships we have with Israel, with the United States, and with the GCC countries.
As someone who has worked on that relationship in your diplomatic career, do you feel that that is something that is ill-advised, this moving away also being so being so accepting of everything the United States expects us to do vis-a-vis Iran, whether it is the Chabahar port and all of the relationships that we have invested in with Iran?
Well, I think that the single biggest factor, possibly, which weighed on policy in the present set of circumstances was the fact that we have such a large Indian community in the Gulf countries. And to that extent, we were looking at the situation largely through the eyes, not so much of the United States or Israel alone, but also through the eyes of the Gulf governments, simply because of the very large number of Indians who live and work there. The number is almost 10 billion. So that's quite a significant factor when you actually decide on policy. Now, having said that, I think we could have possibly balanced our position differently. I think that the attack or the assassination of the Iranian supreme leader, we should have certainly said something about it. At the very least, expressed condolences much earlier. Similarly, the sinking of the Iranian naval vessel after it had participated in an event in India is something which we could have mentioned. That would have helped nuance and balance our position, because certainly the impression has been created that our position was tilted too much in one direction. Now, sometimes these things happen, you can't check it. In retrospect, it would have been better to have balanced our position a little.
That's very diplomatic. Um, let's go to where India and Pakistan are at this point of time, because last year we saw Operation Sindoor being waged, and immediately after the Pahalgam attack, actually we heard the Indus Water Treaty being suspended, and that is supposed to be actually something that is a very powerful tool that India could use. What is happening on that suspension? Because we know that it's been reported that Pakistan has been speaking about it at the UN recently. So how does that Indus Water Treaty suspension, has it achieved its goal? Where does it go from here? And then what else is happening in this relationship?
Well, in my view, the Indus Waters Treaty, it being placed in a kind of suspense, it being suspended and not abrogated. Uh, I think it's not so much a tool as a signal. The fact is that we have tried to send the strongest possible signal to Pakistan that look, these terrorist attacks are not acceptable, and you cannot think that some aspects of our relationship can go on as if nothing has changed, or you cannot ring fence certain aspects of the relationship away from the terrorism factor. So it was a signal. It's not a tool in the sense that you can't physically stop water from going to Pakistan. It's not the treaty which enables water to go to Pakistan. It's geography which
Yeah.
determines that. So it's not a tool, but it's certainly a powerful signal. Now, what do we do with Pakistan? Now, this is a perennial question. I think in India, in every decade since independence, this question has posed itself, that what is the right policy mix to deal with such a recalcitrant neighbor, and there are different views. In my view, we, we cannot have a policy on Pakistan which is effective, which is based only on military or security related parameters. You need a more rounded policy in which diplomacy has to be also a very active ingredient. I think what has happened is that we are presently in the midst of a highly securitized policy. There's very little diplomacy. I think we need to balance that better, and also think of how to introduce diplomatic aspects into our handling of Pakistan. It's not easy. Public opinion is very riled up in India. They buy into this approach that how can talks and terror go together. But the fact is that you cannot ignore a country which is 250 million people, which has nuclear weapons, with which you have a deeply adversarial relationship. And the lesson which is also emerging from global events, whether it is the war in Ukraine or whether it is the current situation in Iran between with Israel and US and Iran, what is also becoming very clear, again, I mean, this is not new, is that military options don't throw up political solutions. And you cannot just leave it to kinetic actions or military actions to create favorable political circumstances. It doesn't happen. So the world moves in a different way. I think, given all that, we have to look at how to have a more rounded approach to Pakistan, and that will certainly involve some amount of dealing with it rather than putting the relationship in the refrigerator,
Which it is at currently.
which it is as currently. Certainly, it's been so for some time.
And this is the worst it has been in our long history.
Oh, it's been like this many times before, but I think this is the longest downturn. India Pakistan relations historically have always followed a cyclical pattern, that there are ups and downs, that you have sudden highs and then deep lows. But this is quite a pronounced low, and we have been on this very low plateau for a number of years. And to that extent, there's been nothing quite like this in the past.
when you see, we had the cricket World Cups, and we saw how the Indian and Pakistani cricket teams behaved with each other. There's no handshake, and it was just, complete mess. Then you see movies like Dhurandhar, which have captured popular imagination here about Indian spies infiltrating Pakistan. As someone who has lived and worked in Pakistan and managed this relationship and studied it so closely, what do you make of this, the popular culture, popular opinion in this public domain that has, in the way we are treating this relationship? Or is this not unusual?
It's not unusual because with Pakistan, there's always been a great deal of domestic issues involved in framing of policy. It's inescapable. And to some extent, this is so with all our neighbors. But the difficulty is that neighborhood relations are such that you cannot have an effective policy if it is based on sentiment or if you get too passionate about it, because it just won't work. You have to be clinical, and we can see examples of how successful clinical policies sometimes are. I mean, one example, for instance, is with Afghanistan. Till a few years ago, just like you have the current position that talks and terror can't go together, we used to have something similar to that, which was that there's no difference between good Taliban and bad Taliban. But now we've discovered that there is a good Taliban, and that came about because you implemented and devised policies in a clinical way, trying to see how do you best protect your national interests in a situation which is otherwise not very favorable to you. When the US withdrew from Afghanistan in disarray in 2021, it appeared and it was a huge strategic setback for us, because we had invested for 20 years in a relationship which suddenly went up in a puff of smoke.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to retrieve so much ground there, it shows that it is possible to craft a clinical approach and to some extent try to insulate it from your domestic passions and your domestic sentiments. I think with Pakistan it's more difficult, but we should certainly try to do that, because it's not a comfortable situation to be in, that you're poised for something to happen with Pakistan without any communications, without any kind of relationship, and are in this situation which, God forbid, with some unforeseen development leading you into an escalatory pattern from which you don't know how to get off. I think that we have to keep that factor in view and try to see as to what is the best way to handle a difficult neighbor.
Post the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor, hasn't this relationship with Pakistan been used by it, towards domestic ends, and to further the ruling party's domestic agendas?
I think the use of, I mean, Pakistan as a factor in domestic politics has always been there, but yes, it can be said that the domestic factor in Pakistan policies has increased over the past few years quite a lot, and to that extent, it's even more difficult to handle this very, very difficult relationship in a clinical manner.
Did you expect it would go down this direction when in 2014 Prime Minister Modi, inaugurated his first term, started his first term as Prime Minister of India?
No, I thought that in 2015 and some parts of 2014, India-Pakistan relations were going to stabilize quite a lot and possibly move in the direction of improvement. That didn't happen because of certain wrong decisions made by the Pakistanis. I think they clearly missed a major opportunity then, and I think in retrospect, many people in Pakistan, even if they don't say so, realize it. I think Prime Minister Modi's visit to Lahore in December 2015 was a very big opportunity which the Pakistanis did unfortunately let that window close without making use of it. But since then, a lot of changes have taken place. I think there were opportunities to stabilize the relationship in 2022 and 2023 again, which again were missed by both sides. I'm sure in the future also opportunities will present itself. And I think it is incumbent that we try to make use of those opportunities to stabilize the relationship to whatever extent possible.
I have a follow-up question on the Indus Waters Treaty. You said it's suspended right now, and of course it's geography and it's the way the water flows. But if India were to abrogate it, what would it entail? What would it do? Because I was just reading something that Pakistan has, the permanent representative at the UN has put up there, saying that there will be. It's called this move illegal to suspend this treaty, and that it will have serious humanitarian consequences. So, if you can't stop it physically, then what is the signal and what is the consequence and impact that they are anticipating? And if an abrogation happens, which is what people in Kashmir, some political entities in Kashmir would say would be good for Kashmir, then what would that entail?
At its simplest, the Indus Waters Treaty is also an information
Mm.
sharing arrangement. And
Right.
because India is the upper riparian, most of the information is shared by us. So the treaty being placed in suspension means
Mm.
that that information sharing has stopped.
Mm.
Similarly, the treaty has entailed that India accepts certain limitations in how it can design projects on the western Indus rivers. And if you place the treaty, if you abrogate the treaty, that means you are no longer bound by those uh,
Mm.
restrictions.
Obligation. Yeah.
In actual fact, how much will this affect the flow of river waters into Pakistan is a different issue, because
Mm.
most experts would say that, in fact, the actual impact of this on river water flow will not be much. But because it's a lower riparian, Pakistan has all the anxieties of a lower riparian, and they tend to exaggerate and inflate
Mm.
whatever is happening in terms of the treaty being placed in suspension or information not being shared. So much of what comes out with regard to the Indus Waters Treaty are highly exaggerated and hyperinflated claims. The point is that the problem is not so much with the treaty, because the treaty
Mm.
rested on the presumption that India and Pakistan will endeavor to build a cooperative relationship. And as part of the cooperative relationship, they will try to manage the common rivers for mutual benefit. Now, when you
Mm.
are clearly not in a situation of a cooperative relationship and far from it,
Mm.
how the treaty can function is
Mm.
really the point. And I think the signal which was given was that you cannot ring fence river water issues away from the rest of the mess in your bilateral relationship. And it's time that Pakistan tried to take a holistic view of what it means to be a neighboring
Mm.
country to India. I think we are still at that situation. We don't really know whether there is any real introspection in Pakistan about uh, about its responsibility in the state of India-Pakistan relations, because there's a certain onus of responsibility on Pakistan also. We don't know whether that introspection is taking place. Some people say that because of this high and because of its newfound recognition as a mediator and the fact that it is playing such an important role, that that process of introspection, in fact, has been pushed further back. And there is a certain cockiness in Pakistan's
Mm.
approach, which
Mm.
means that the present impasse is not likely to end anytime soon.
This point of time, is there, do you see any opportunity, anything that can restart the relationship, given that you're saying we need to have a sharper focus on what Pakistan is
I
doing?
think political initiatives can always restart the process, and one should never rule out the possibility of major political initiatives emerging. Uh, the fact is that there are always positives in the situation. In my opinion, one positive which I see is that the kind of accusation which India makes against Pakistan and the kind of action which we have taken against Pakistan, in fact, is duplicated almost 100% by the kind of accusations which Pakistan makes against Afghanistan and the kinds of
Yeah,
action Pakistan has taken against Afghanistan. So, if you're
yeah,
confronted with similar situations, it's always possible that somebody will try to think out of the box and try to and wonder whether there is some better way of managing South Asian tensions and South Asian legacy issues. Which is why I say that we should never rule out the possibility of major political initiatives.
are there any books besides the one you've written, The People Next Door, that you think people could read to understand this relationship better, to maybe even look for ideas, as you know, to spark thoughts?
Well, many of my colleagues who have handled India Pakistan relations have written about the relationship in a forward and positive manner. One book which comes to mind is by one of my senior colleagues who died 2 years ago, but was involved very, very closely with trying to take the relationship in a different trajectory, Satinder Lamba. And it's the book is called In the Pursuit of Peace, and it's about the back channel negotiations with Pakistan, which were carried out for about a decade. I think that book is worth reading. One of my successors in Islamabad, Ajay Bisaria, has also written about India Pakistan diplomacy and India Pakistan relations. His book is somewhat curiously called Anger Management, but it's a good provides very good insights into India Pakistan relations. I think there's also apart from books by diplomats or by scholars of international relations, I think it's also good to delve into uh, literature in both India and Pakistan to try to understand how the relationship has developed. So there are many authors who have written non-fiction works, and there are many very fine poets who have written about the curious aspects of India-Pakistan relations. And I think those interested would really benefit from also delving into that.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thanks a lot.
Those were great recommendations. I'll put them up as I publish this episode. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.